Hey, everybody. This is Jim and Jeremy from Experience AV. We've got a super exciting episode ahead. More audio geekery, quite frankly. So I'll let Jim kick us off. Jim, what are we up to today?
Well, today we're trying out something new. We're going to call this series of shows Under the Hood, where it's not quite a review. It's not quite like a love letter. It's just we're going to take something that we love in the audio industry, probably a tool, could be a piece of kit, and we're just going to kind of break it apart and see what it's all about and maybe share a few stories about why we use it, why we'd like to use it, and see where we go with it.
That's
So
exciting.
today we're going to be talking about the NTi XL2. It is the everything device, anything audio, anything analog audio that you want to measure. This is what you need to do it. So let's go over to the slides.
Coming your way.
Sweet. So before we kick off the series, we do a terrible job of thanking our sponsors and thanking the people who support us. So we wanted to get this nice up in front so that we actually remember to do it. But we definitely want to do a huge shout out to Shore and Koenig Meyer for supporting the show so early on. And we have a lot of people working from home. We have a lot of people doing a lot of web conferencing. And if you want to sound good, if you want to sound professional, getting a professional setup could go a long way. And so we encourage you to take a peek at the offerings from these two manufacturers to just make you sound professional.
Thank you, Sure, and K&M.
Indeed. All right, so let's get to the show. We are talking about this beauty right here. I think we just need to take a second and breathe it in and just bask in its glory.
Well, and if I
This,
can just say, we have to almost disagree with the first statement that you made, because if ever there was going to be a love story, this is it. I I mean, the XL2, I've cuddled with this thing. I literally, it doesn't make a great spooning partner, but with some
right?
accessories, you can get there.
Oh, bad
Not those
visual.
kind of
All right.
accessories, Jim. Not those kind of accessories. Dude, God, stay with me. Audio, audio. Okay.
Yes, yes,
Anyway,
yes.
anyway, I apologize, but this is going to be a bit of a love story because this tool has been hands down the most impactful tool in my career from a commissioning audio perspective.
Agreed. It separates the professionals from the you know from
The
from from the practitioners.
the wheat from the chaff, if you will.
Indeed.
I love it.
So let's take a peek. So first of all, I hope people have heard of NTi. They are just a powerhouse in the measurement industry, and this is what they build measurement equipment for. Right? They want people to use their equipment in all these different applications, evacuation systems, noise measurement, live sound, electroacoustic installations, which is kind of our wheelhouse for auditoriums, for conference rooms. This is our bread and butter. Um, I haven't spoken to an acoustician that didn't have several of these in their briefcase, right? Just ready to go and get out there and take measurements. And then quality control, right? This is something that we don't play a whole lot with, but I'm just fascinated uh, at what this little piece of equipment can do. It blows me away.
You know, it's interesting. If I could, before you get off this page here, Jim, I got introduced to this obviously through AV9000 and ultimately using this tool as a way to commission AV systems, right? Which it mentions, you've got here electroacoustic installations. That's a really fancy European world word for AV installations right there. But it's really interesting because I actually do have a friend that's an acoustician here in Arizona. And when I first met him and went over to his shop, I was all excited because I thought I was going to introduce something new to him. And I'm like, have you ever heard of the XL2? And he's like, I own seven of them. And I'm like, wow, that's an awful lot of money that you've poured
Yes.
into that. And I only have one. So I'm just
Yeah.
excited to be here right now. But what I wanted to note is, evacuation systems, noise measurement, live sound, electroacoustic installations, all of these are kind of a measurement of quality in a way. I mean, it's interesting to put that as a separate section. And I think what they're indicating here is almost like quality control for products or for component manufacturers versus like testing systems as a whole. But boy, doesn't that show the range of capability that this meter has.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's what I loved about this exercise is just reading up on the manual of the XL2. I don't think I use half of what it can do. I mean, it's really incredible, and the quality control, just like the vibration measurements that it can do. And I think we were talking a little bit about how you can set this up outside a construction site to measure the vibration to make sure everything is staying within code. So that could be another example of quality control, just measuring how much noise, how much vibration trucks or payloaders or whatever are introducing to a neighborhood.
Well,
It's crazy.
and we use this, right? We use this all the time for quality control within our own systems. We want to
Hmm.
test the whole system as a product, a single product, a usable outcome. And this helps us quality control all of our components, including all of them
Yeah,
connected together as a single system.
yeah,
I'm a
I love
fan,
it.
in case you didn't know.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit. Same here. So let's get into it. What does this thing do? What are we talking about when we say we love this device? It saved our butts so many times. Um, in my estimation, it is the Swiss Army knife for the audio industry. It kind of does a little bit of everything. As long, you do need adapters, you do need accessories, but it can provide sound level metering, right? With any type of weighting you want. It can track peak. It can record, right? You can let it going for hours and weekends and whatever, just to see how loud the audio in rooms get. And it can also take class 2, class 1 microphones. So if you want to get specific and if you want to determine how loud something is with the tracking that is available with the XL2 and its accessories, but part of AV 9000 is the requirement for ISO 9000 and AV 9000 is having NIST traceable measuring instruments. And that means you're able to, like, if I tell you that this system is measuring 70 dB SPL, but you have a meter that says, oh, my meter says it's measuring 60 dB SPL, which one's right? The fact that this can be traced to the National Institute of Standards, and I'm going to mess that up, but
Oh,
whatever.
you almost had
I
it.
hate it.
You were so close. It's the
I don't
National
even.
Institute of Standards and Technology. Please continue.
I thought time was in there somewhere, but okay. What? But if I say that my meter, my
Pull it
meter
together, Jim.
can
Pull it
be
together.
traced to an NIST standard, that means that's a national standard, but the NIST is traceable to the international standard. And so when this device, because it is traced back to the NIST, if my device is telling me it's 70 dB SPL, it is 70 dB SPL.
It's like
And
the equivalent of being mil-spec, right?
that's right. Yeah. 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 So I'm a huge fan of that.
Jim, do you
We
know
all,
how class 1 versus class 2 is defined? Is that an NIST standard as well? Are they defining class 1 versus class 2, or is that an ISO standard?
I might even be an AES standard. I'm not sure. I know it's how accurate the microphone, it's how precise, I should say. It's how precise a pressure a microphone can measure. And so class 1 is obviously going to be a lot more precise. That's like a measurement microphone. That's why they're so expensive. And so it might be plus or minus 0.1 dB or something like that. I
So
mean,
that makes sense. So class 1 versus class 2 is really a designator of how accurate the measurement can be. Class 2
Yeah.
is pretty deadly accurate, but class 1 is going to get accurate to within a smaller increment of measurement, a percentage of accuracy back to that NIST standard, right? So if to your point, if audio or some sort of vibration measurement is so critical in nature that you want to get as close to that reference standard as you can, it's almost really in a way a different pricing level that you need to get the tools necessary to measure with that level of accuracy. I mean, I
Yeah.
remember my first SPL meter was like a little $40 guy that didn't have the ability to record anything. You know, you could change a couple of the weights and those types of things, but it was pretty limited. But it was so much more than not having one, right?
Absolutely.
And then I had the XL2 in my hand, and you mentioned it earlier, the ability to measure over time. You bring that time dimension in there, and you're able to record these measurements over time and actually see measurement within a space. That was a significant game changer from my perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I just looked it up. It's different ranges across the frequencies. I thought they'd be more impressive. I mean, clearly they're impressive, right? We're spending a lot of money for it, but basically class 1 for the entire range looks to be about accurate plus or minus 2.5 dB, whereas a class 2 is accurate to plus or minus about 6 dB.
what?
Yeah. Yeah. That's that's what I got.
That does not seem as accurate as I think it should be.
Yeah. But I guess the point is, you know,
Class 1's more
if
accurate than class 2? Yep,
class
got
1
it.
is certainly more accurate than class 2. It's also, once you get to this, I guess, level of precision, as long as you're using that same device to measure systems, and as long as you calibrate, as long as you either calibrate or confirm the calibration of that device, you're going to get consistent results. And so really, does it matter if you're measuring 66 or 65 dB? Like the human ear can barely hear that anyway.
As long as you're
You know?
using, to your point, the same standard, the
Yeah.
same reference, the same tool, the
Yeah.
same reference, everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, all right. Let's get back to
Yeah.
the base
We
functions.
digress.
Let's hit on what are the basic things that this thing does, Jim?
Okay. So in addition to sound level meters, we got real-time analyzers, RTAs. So that means we can see not only overall how loud a system is, but we can get granular with that information, and we can see exactly how much energy is being received by the microphone at different frequencies along the way. And so that opens us up to obviously EQing rooms. We can also use it to, we'll get into it more in acoustic analyzers, but we can look at RT60s as well, to get reverberation time across spectrums. Another huge thing that we use the RTA for is finding the noise criteria of a room. So if you have that RTA up and find the energy per frequency, you can just plug that into a free spreadsheet and get the NC curve of the room. And now we know it's not only the ambient noise, but we know exactly the shape of that ambient noise. And so that NC number is going to give us a much better idea of how quiet, how well behaved that room is.
If you're waiting for me, I'm laughing because Tom Kerr made it onto the live feed. So shout out to Tom Kerr, who is like, you know, one of my mentors in AV,
Same.
especially from an audio and voltage perspective. And he went ahead and provided the information that we didn't have in the feed. So, and he had a funny pun. He said, "You missed it by this much." Right? That was a good one, Tom. God, we are geeks.
I know.
So class 1 precision plus or minus 0.7 dB, class 2 general purpose plus or minus 1 dB, and it's the IEC 60651 standard. Oh, and new information, breaking news. The 60651 was superseded by the 61672 IEC standard for those who really want to trace this all the way back. Shout out, Tom. Thank you, sir. Way to hold our integrity in check, my friend. Thank you.
All right.
That was lovely.
Pressure's on, man.
Pressure's on. Yeah. So why don't you talk about analog analyzers?
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, yeah. All right. So RTAs, we got energy by frequency. We can also measure acoustics. And I am not claiming that with this XL2, now all of a sudden you're an acoustician, but at least you can begin to speak their language, right? I can take a ton of these measurements. I kind of know what they're about, how to address them or how to fix them. That's what you need an acoustician for, right? They know about construction, they know about balancing air handlers, they know about all these different I guess techniques that you can do to improve a room's acoustics, but at least we can arm them with basic information. If we tell them we can measure an RT60 of the room, if we can get FFT information where they can really get into some, what's happening, is there comb filtering going on? Is there any narrow band stuff that's going on in the room? If we can provide an FFT that gives them a little bit more information about what's going on, we can speak their language a little bit clearer. It's just like going to a job site armed with a NetScout or some type of network tool, where without it, you're just an AV guy. But with that tool, now all of a sudden we can give the IT crew a lot more information than we could without it. So we got RT60, we've got NC information, we've got FFT, we've got STIPA, right, that we talked about last time, where we can measure intelligibility with this tool, which is fantastic. So it just allows us to get a lot more information acoustically about rooms. We'll get into this a little bit more later, but having that acoustic information should and can really guide your design decisions. Right, because we have been deploying a lot of those video bar codecs. They're fantastic. They're easy to use, and in a acoustically well-behaved room, they're fantastic. I mean, they are really impressive. Out to like 30 feet, you can just use one of those stupid little video bar codecs, and you're good to go. But as soon as you put them into an acoustic toilet, like a middle school gymnasium, or just something where the where the construction of the room isn't conducive to those things, where you've got, instead of an RT60 of 0.6 seconds or 0.5 seconds, if you've got rooms that are 0.9 seconds or above or something like that, those video bar codecs cannot perform. And so how incredible would it be to come armed, prepared with that information, where it's just maybe a 5-minute measurement that you can do with a portable speaker and this thing, and have that govern your design decisions. So that's another huge benefit to using this. And we also have the analog analyzer. This is where we measure signal to noise, where we measure THD of a system. We can really understand what's going on inside that system electronically. So the top level, we were talking a lot about acoustics, sound pressure level meters, RTAs. We've got that test microphone, class 1, class 2. That's feeding information into the XL2. Now we're talking about electronic signals. And we can measure signal to noise of a system, of an amplifier, of a device. We can measure THD of that. We can really know exactly what's going on. Is there any distortion in the signal? Do I have enough space between my signal level and the noise level of the system? Are my users going to hear a hiss? What's going on? It can also be used to test the health of the system. How old are these devices? Should they be replaced? So there's a lot of really powerful stuff, not only looking at things through the lens of the test microphone, but also at looking at the electronic components, the E-to-E components of it as well.
The voltage, baby, the voltage.
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to, right? This is just a really responsive, really accurate voltage meter. right? If we're getting a voltage from a microphone, from fluctuations in pressure, if we're getting differences in voltage from an actual system, from the output of an amplifier, this is telling us exactly what's going on very, very fast and very, very precisely. So it's a great piece of test equipment.
So,
And I
Jim,
have
are
to
you
pick it up.
saying that you can do the same tests with a voltmeter?
No, because voltmeters are not responsive. They don't have the precision. I don't think they have the. They can't. They can't measure voltages as low as this can. Right? When we're talking about picking up microphone voltages, we're talking about like 1/10,000th of a volt. And if you're looking at a voltmeter, most of those are 100th of a volt or something like that, so
Yeah.
it doesn't have the precision, and it doesn't have the responsiveness, where this has to be able to measure 20 kilohertz audio, so it has to be able to respond really fast to any type of those fluctuating voltages across all of those frequencies at the same time. A voltmeter, it's a slow moving thing. I can kind of give you what the voltage is, but I gotta get up and I gotta get there. So this is it's a computer. It responds way faster across way more frequencies than a voltmeter could.
But to your point, the irony is it truly is just a voltage measurement that is then has some incredible intelligence provided to it with time dimension to be able to provide all these various measurement capabilities.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
So
And
what's
then we got
over?
options.
Yeah, we
You
got
want
options.
We got options. So the base model, right, gets you sound level meter, RTA, acoustic analyzer, analog analyzer. You can do RT60, you can do signal to noise, you can do THD, you can get all the good stuff. But if you find yourself making a lot of these measurements, you can make your life a lot easier with some of these options. The STIPA is an option as well. It's a pricey option, but now you can talk intelligibility. And so now you can test intelligibility of large rooms, you can test intelligibility of life safety systems, and just measuring those systems is a very profitable skill to have, right? With all these life safety systems coming up with intelligibility requirements, someone's got to measure them. And if you can come in and say, hey, I've got a device that I can measure them, now all of a sudden you become a lot more valuable to the construction team. So that's steep, and you can mess around like we did last time, or 2 times ago, where we measured the intelligibility of conference systems, we measured the intelligibility of Teams. You can, when we had the intelligibility option, we would measure the intelligibility of like a POTS line and just let's see what happens with 3 kilohertz audio. Let's see how intelligibility is infected, and just have a rockin' good time on a Friday night. Like, what else are you gonna do? Yeah. And so the STIPA is the big option. That is a feature option, and the rest of them are things that you can kind of do already if you pair it to like an Excel spreadsheet. But if you don't want to go through the hassle, like if you wanted to plot the NC, the noise criteria curve, you can do it in Excel, right? Just from the RTA measurements, or you can get the noise curve analyzer option and just have it do it for you. Take a snapshot of it, or just connect to it through the USB and have that screenshot printed out on your computer automatically. They have a lot more, like Projector Pro. You can set up the XL2 to different sound level tolerances, and it'll tell you how loud your system can be if you need to drop the level a little bit in a theater or something like that. If you get an extended acoustic pack, you get a lot more precision in the FFT to, I think, like a 1/12 of an octave or something. The spectral limits is getting into some acoustic stuff there. The vibration option, that's where if you get paid to verify like a construction site is not vibrating things, or an airport or something is not causing too much vibration to the neighboring area, this option can measure it for you. And there's a ton of software options that'll just make measuring or tracking or reporting or gathering this data over time a lot simpler. Sound power, it can measure if you want to do some loudspeaker testing and you want to see exactly how much sound power is coming from a source. It's crazy. It's crazy what this device can do. It kind of blew my mind.
I just want to add on to your point, Jim. The base functions of the XL2 are incredible. And for, the typical AV commercial audiovisual installation organization, it does pretty much everything you need at a base function with maybe the STIPA license. I don't want to discount the STIPA license. But
It's
the
a
rest
biggie.
of them, it's a big one. The rest of them are, if you are an acoustician and it's your job to be measuring audio environments to that molecular level, then there's some argument that some of these options, you might need them for additional resolution of the measurement. But to Jim's point, you might also need them because you want to do a process quickly. Yes, I could go load it into some other spreadsheet, but now I can just push a button and it'll spit out the NC curve. If my job is to be measuring NC curve as an acoustician all the time, there's a lot of value to these extra options. The acoustician that I know here locally, one of the practices that he has is material testing. So a lot of the aerospace organizations will actually give him sections of material and he will put it in his anechoic chamber and he will slam that piece of material with various frequencies. And he's got a number of XL2s microphones inside of the anechoic chamber that he's measuring. He also has a vibration tool, one of the accessories. So he has the vibration option. So he's looking at what does sound do to material from a vibration standpoint as well as a frequency response standpoint. And that blew my mind because I just hadn't even entered into that realm from an audio perspective.
Right.
But he needs all kinds of these optional functions to be able to provide the science that he's looking to get.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, just running through for this presentation, we don't touch half. We don't touch half of what this thing can do.
All right. So
All
those are the functions, base functions and
what it can
optional. This is what this thing can do.
Yeah. Let's take a look at what it looks like. There we go. So, when initially I thought it was, it's a beautiful piece of equipment right there, but the interface is very interesting. It doesn't have a touchscreen, but it is super rugged. Like I've had this in my test kit kicking around for years, and it just lasts. There's no issue with a touchscreen because it has a scroll wheel and the enter button, and that's kind of how you surf around everything. It has some feature buttons as well in terms of start or stop recording or pause, escape out of a menu. You can make it lighter and stuff, but really the major menu navigation is from just that scroll wheel. And NTi spent a lot of time in making that just really simple, really fast to use. The first time you use it takes a minute. In some of the AQAV CQT classes where we teach people how to use these things for signal to noise and for sound pressure level measurements and stuff like that, you see people struggle with it a little bit for the first few measurements, but then after the third time they pick it up, it just starts to click. And now after years, it's mindless, right? You just go and you can surf through all the menus very, very quickly. And just some things to point out, right? It has the XLR input. That's going to be where you put your test mic or the system that you're connecting to electronically. It also has an RCA input, but really, we're professionals, right? Who uses an RCA anymore? Gotta go with the XLR. In addition to that, there's a microphone where you can take voice notes for your measurements. They really try to make it easy to use. And I have gotten the report data from an XL2. It's really well thought out. They did a really good job to share all the report data very easily. You can upload it into software. You can just open it up to read the text, and it is easy to get the information that you need out of it.
I
Yeah.
actually I gotta just jump in here and beat this drum with you because they've designed this thing in a way that allows you to go do an entire day of measurements. And with a proper process, you can do an entire day of measurements without ever going and recording anything in a spreadsheet or on your computer. It's all on the XL2, and you can take it back to your shop at the end of the day, plug it into your computer, and pull out an entire day's worth of measurements or more. And so I got really good at doing this process with voice notes. Okay, this is room 1, and then all the
Mhm.
measurements that followed that voice note. Okay, this is room 2, and then all the measurements that followed that voice note. They really designed this thing not just to be an amazing analyzer and an amazing meter and measurement device, but an incredible production workhorse tool that I think you might be able to run over by a car. I'm not saying that I've tried that, and I'm
I
not
would not want
saying,
to try that.
yeah, it's not in the specification, but
Yes, no.
it's it's pretty rugged.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously battery operated, but it's got the DC power socket, so you can leave it on all weekend. Don't have to worry about that. The USB connector to transfer information or to get the screenshot onto your computer, which is handy for taking screenshots or for training opportunities. And the digital I/O input that can be used for the different accessories. It can be used for triggers. It can be used for those the different light sticks that'll tell you if you're in the green zone, the yellow zone, red zone. There's just it's a really well thought out piece of gear. It's got headphones output, a Toslink output, SD card for more memory. You can obviously record notes. You can record audio. Audio is eaten up pretty quickly that way, and then you could put it on a tripod if you had to. A lot of people like to remote the microphones, but it gives you the option to do so there. So that's the hardware interface in a nutshell.
Nice.
Yeah, you want to get into some of the software interface, navigating the menus?
I would be happy to. Give me 2 seconds here. And we will get this up. I'm pretty excited about this.
I'm really excited about it too. I just think we need to take another moment.
So here, everybody, you see some fun graphic work that Jim and I did, and we took a image of the XL2 and we superimposed the live window of it from my computer onto the image, so it looks as if we have a live XL2 here. That's pretty incredible. It leverages one of the features of the XL2 where you can plug it into your computer via USB and actually just view the screen on your computer live as if you were looking at the screen of the XL2, which, to Jim's point, is really handy for training or doing fancy podcasts like this one. So we're pretty excited to be able to show this particular view. And what we wanted to do is again, just orient you with the interface. Hardware wise, on the buttons, it's important to hit on the buttons first. So if you look at the bottom section of the XL2, starting from the top left, that's an escape button. If you find yourself deep in menus, the escape button is going to get you out of them. On the next one down is a page turning button. So if there's multiple pages within a particular measurement, you can change those pages at the push of a button instead of having to use the rotary control, which is the perfect segue to the rotary control. This is the front man of the whole meter right here. You're going to do most of your work with the rotary wheel in the middle and that enter button in the middle of the rotary wheel. The rotary wheel, and I'm actually going to turn my rotary.
Yeah.
Yep. Rotary, the R wheel, we're going to call it. So I'm going to turn the R wheel, and you can see that the cursor inside of the XL2 is going amongst all the various selections that you can make. So I'm just turning it to the right here. And if I turn it to the left, of course, it'll cycle back through all the various things that I can affect or change on this particular page that I'm on. So again, your main nav is that rotary
The
rot
wheel.
the wheel. Yeah, we're gonna go with the wheel. The wheel is how you're going to get to things. The enter button in the middle is how you're going to engage them and ultimately change things and execute different functions within the meter. On the top right, you have a play stop button. This is what brings the time dimension in to the XL2. So the play stop button allows you to actually record things over time and take measurements over time, which is very powerful. So play, as you might imagine, plays, and stop also stops. The button down below is measurement, is a pause button. What's useful about the pause button is if you're in the middle of a time measurement, you can pause the measurement and then actually unpause it and continue on that same measurement, whereas an actual stop is going to end that measurement and end cap that and create a new file if you needed to do a second measurement. So just gives you the flexibility on extending that initial measurement or creating a whole new one. Down below, you have a speaker button, which allows you to actually hear the audio that is coming through the XL2 out of the speaker on the rear of it. There is a limit button over to the right. The limit button is actually going to light red if we limit the device. So I'm limiting the device, and you can see that it's going orange on the screen. Over here on my XL2, that limit light is also going orange when we hit the upper limits of the tool. So it's just a visual indicator that you're hitting some upper limits of the measurement device. So that really makes up the physical human interface of how you're going to interact with the tool, select the different functions, and execute those different functions. With that, let's do a little bit of a tour around the tool itself. So what I'm selected on right now, what you're seeing is the sound level meter. This top menu is all of the base measurements as well as any of the additional licensed measurements that you might have purchased for the meter here available in one list. So sound level meter and RTA, FFT, RT60 measurement, polarity measurement, delay time, root mean square or total harmonic distortion plus noise. You can get a full oscilloscope. You've got Stipa. So of course, when I first bought this, I didn't have the Stipa and it didn't show Stipa at the bottom. But as you add licenses and unlock those licenses, additional measurements become available to you. There's also a calibrate, a profile, and a system settings. This is where you can get into the back end of the device and kind of see what's my serial number, what current firmware am I running. If I scroll over to this next subcategory or submenu, there's additional options within the main selection. So I've got settings, I've got scheduler. We talked about this. This is really cool. The ability to actually schedule measurements and leave it if you're wanting to leave it. So like Jim mentioned, a good application of this might be sticking it in a weatherproof box outside strapped to a light pole across the street from a construction site and measuring vibration during work hours to ensure that they are within their agreed upon limits. You have options. This is where it shows all the various options that are installed on the device. You can see I've got the extended acoustics pack as well as the Stipa, because I haven't been able to get anybody to spring for any of the other licenses. And then, of course, information. So that's the system menu, just real quick. Profile, this is really cool because you can actually build profiles. So if you have different people using the device and you want to set the device up a little bit differently, you can save a profile and then re-access that profile, which is really nice. And then calibrate is important if you are needing to calibrate microphones and calibrate the meters. We recommend using the microphones that NTi sells because they are pre-calibrated for these devices, and they also have a data sheet, an electronic data sheet that transfers the minute you plug the microphone into the device. It actually transfers all the calibration data from the microphone to the meter, so you get the best possible calibrated measurement at that point. So going back up into SL meter and RTA, which is quite frankly an area I spend a lot of time in myself, and I know Jim does as well. So again, we're on the sound level meter here. And if we go to that sub menu, you see that it says 1, 2, 3. Well, here is where I can switch it from a sound level meter over to an RTA. And now, again, I'm using the measurement microphone that's plugged directly into my XL2, and it's picking up the acoustic frequency response in my space. You can actually see my voice being picked up by the microphone, and we're looking at a full RTA here. It's incredible that this little handheld device has this amount of information available to you without having to pull out a computer. There's a lot of
And
things. Oh, go ahead, Jim.
yeah, I was just gonna say I love how you can also use it to compare it. Like you see the lines there spread out per octave, so you can take an acoustic, well, yeah, I guess a frequency snapshot of what's going on in the room, make your adjustments, and see how it compares to where it was, which is, yeah, exactly. Or if you want to play EQ, if you want to play with level, if you want to adjust something, you can see what you're doing, what you're doing to the performance.
As you move along the main menu bar at the top, you'll also see that in this meter function, there's also an XLR. This is where you would change it from XLR to RCA if you were measuring this via. Well, I wouldn't know that you could plug a microphone in via the RCA, so I'm not sure that I've ever used
If
that
you
one.
push hard enough.
if you if you push hard enough, or yeah, I think if you just combine all the solder all the pins together into one
Yeah,
pin, you could probably,
yeah,
that would work.
for sure.
Yeah, 100%. Cool. Moving on. So I'm going to hit the escape button. You can notice that when I'm inside the menu, I hit escape and boom. This next one here has to do with all of your save functionality. So we mentioned you can create folders on your memory card, you can create files on your card, you can name your projects, you can name your rooms. You can really use this tool all by itself and do a lot of tracking within it if you have multiple things to do with it within a single session. And this is the area that you would do that at. Going into the RTA a little bit itself, you can see that there's a lot of little areas within the actual measurement function that you can change. Like, for example, I can go to a 1-to-1 octave view or a third octave view by just selecting the two options here. I can set my automatic marker. So you can see the marker that's kind of bouncing around, and it's showing you which frequency is the loudest within the pickup. So you see it bouncing from like 400 to 630. I've got that set to automatic. I can also say, hey, I only want to know what's happening in the 400 hertz range. So if I want to come down and just select that 400 hertz octave, I can lock that in and that marker will never move. I will say that I tend to use the automatic because I want to see what's happening in the systems that I'm using it for, but that's the difference there. Anything you want to add on the RTA, my friend?
No, I think we're good.
So going back over to the sound level meter, this is cool. Let's go down to the actual interface itself. So you can see that it gives me the selection here. If I hit enter, it gives me the option for what weighting I want to measure. So again, Jim spoke to just the incredible functionality available in this meter, as well as really the configurability and flexibility that they provide so that you can measure the way that you want to measure. So you have A, C, Z, as well as some additional weighting if you want to get further into it. Please see Tom Kerr if you want to understand
Yeah.
beyond A, C, Z weighting. But you also see that once you select a weighting, it's going to ask you for your time. So you have slow and fast, you have equal over time. There's a number of different time weighting measurements that you can apply here. I generally like, and then you also have it live, max, min, T3, T5. These are, again, various parameters that you can apply to the measurement that aligns to a whole bunch of different standards, which is what is so amazing. This is truly an international device. It hits multiple international standards from multiple places. I usually like to have a fast reading, which is what you're seeing up here. So it's super responsive to the level change within the microphone pickup. I usually like to keep an EQ, so this is over time, and this is related to using the play stop button for recording a measurement over time. And then I also like to have the slow reading. So slow is, again, reacting to the changes of level within the microphone, but it's responding slower and thus giving you a slower response over time. To give you the full time aspect of things, I'm going to hit the play, pause, play, stop button, and you can see at the bottom of the meter that it actually is now starting to count. It's counting up from 1 second, 2 second, 3 second, 4 second, 5 second. And what's happening is you're getting the live readings from the A fast and the A slow, but in the middle, that is now engaged because I'm doing a time measurement, and it's actually showing me the A weighted time, the A weighted SPL measurement over the amount of time that I am recording it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit stop. And we should see a fun little thing here that says, do you want to save this? This is where you're saving your measurements to your SD card, and you're able to pull them off of your computer later. I'm going to go ahead and delete this. But what's nice is that AEQ measurement in the middle won't move. It stays right there based on my last time measurement. So my last time measurement, with me talking 3 feet away from the microphone over about 29 seconds, was a 70.7 dB average over that time. That is an incredibly useful thing when you have speech and not consistent noise going through a system or wherever you're trying to measure. As we know, audio is not a consistent experience in terms of level and frequency and amplitude, and so you need a way to measure those things over a period of time and start to take the averages as a way to understand performance. And that's one of my favorite things that this tool does. Anything you want to add before I go on there, Jimbo?
No, no.
So that I've taken like most of the time to hit on the user interface and the SL meter and the RTA. The rest of these are the various different measurements that you can do. This is FFT, so it shows you a fast Fourier transform wave. You've got the same types of settings that you can change in there. If you're looking to do an RT60 measurement, this is of course a measurement over time, so you've got to use that play stop button. You've got polarity. Oh, did you have something?
And I'll just add the RT60, whereas it's super easy to measure and very powerful in terms of how live a room is going to sound. You do need a beefy source. So you do need a beefy loudspeaker because you have to get 60 dB above the ambient noise. And so it's just something to keep in mind. If most of our rooms are going to be ambient noise of around 40 dB SPL or something like that, maybe 30, 35 somewhere, that means our noise source needs to get 60 dB above that, so 100 plus dB. That's going to be really loud, could be even a little bit dangerous, so you might want to consider earplugs, and you also might want to consider the adjacent offices or rooms to say, hey, I'm going to make a really loud noise in here. Bear with me, it'll be over very soon. So just a word of caution.
As well as the source, depending on what you're using, you may be pushing it beyond its capabilities to achieve some of those levels. They do make some pretty incredible RT60 speaker sources that are tuned and expensive and get mounted, and they look like spaceships, I think. Have you seen one of those?
No, I haven't. Sounds cool.
Yeah, so NTi sells one actually. It's kind of a multi-speaker spaceship that you mount on a tripod, and it will do over 100 dB.
You had me at spaceship.
I had you at spaceship. RMS THD. This is another area that we spend a fair amount of time in, and this is that electronic or voltage measurement, analog measurement that Jim mentioned earlier. So we're using this for measuring total harmonic distortion plus noise, and use it pretty regularly. You also have the oscilloscope, which is it's actually taking the voltage from the microphone and showing it, but I typically don't use this measurement. And then STIPA. This is the third area that we use all the time, and this is for running that STIPA test. Got to have a STIPA signal source. Like a lot of measurements in the acoustic world, it's a time measurement. So you've got to use that time dimension and the ability to hit play and record a measurement over time. But this is what that type of screen looks like. Well, Jim, that kind of concludes my overview of the user interface and being able to at least show off a little bit of the measurement screens. Really cool idea to overlay the tool itself. So I think I'm good.
Love it. That's awesome.
So let's get back to your.
Yeah. So I mean, we talked about the device. We talked about the options, software options. I mean, if you like accessorizing, we got accessories, baby. We got tons of accessories. We put this screen up not to really expect people to read it, but we did want to just showcase how versatile this device is, you know, and some of our favorites are obviously the microphones. We talked about that sound calibrator, which is fantastic in case you want to make sure that the device continues to perform accurately and precisely. Obviously, the power supply if you want to leave it plugged in over a weekend or something like that. The stack light I thought was really cool. Like, and I just never thought that you could use this device in this way. So if you're running a theater, if you're running a show, and you want to make sure that sound pressure stays within a certain tolerance, you can set limits up in the XL2, use the I/O port, and have it light green, yellow, or red. If red is obviously getting too loud, you need to adjust something on the amplifiers or the mixer just to keep it safe. Another outstanding idea for these devices is the netbox, right? If let's say you're deploying these around a city to capture acoustic information, vibration information, what have you, instead of having to go around every day or every week to collect that information, you can set it up into a locked, environmentally safe box and just have it ping you either through Wi-Fi or cellular or whatever data, and just have that data transmitted to you automatically. I just think that is an incredible accessory, one I would have never thought of, but I love that NTi did.
It's like acoustics in the cloud.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. I just think they really did a good job in presenting this, and GPS receiver in case you need to know exactly where these measurements were taken, and the accelerometer. I just never thought to use it for a vibration meter. I don't know why not. It makes total sense, but I just wanted to show people what one of those vibration devices would look like. So I thought that was a very interesting accessory. We got accessories, baby.
The GPS receiver is really interesting. I didn't even know they had that as a accessory before we made this list. It's interesting. We have a good friend who's engaged me recently for a potential design here in Arizona, and it's a large design in an outside field, and they're looking to install an audio system with a microphone, and they need to measure coverage, and they need to measure a lot of things. The unfortunate thing is this is not a flat field. There are hills, so measuring the various different line of sight capabilities, how cool would it be to have the ability to have a GPS tracker so that it's plotting my physical locations amongst a large piece of land? That's super geeky, and I love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely love it. And the accelerometer, that's the vibration stuff, right?
Yeah.
So NTi actually sells accelerometers that you can plug into the tool, and now it's a professional vibration measurement device.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I got you covered. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I mean, at this point, I just thought we'd talk a little bit about how we've used it in the past, how we want to use it in the future. Something that I really think a lot of people should spend more time doing is maintaining systems and doing these performance measurements in systems that are put in production, not just for commissioning or staging or something like that. If we start measuring THD and signal to noise with the XL2 for existing systems, we can start to get data on the health of the devices, right? So if let's say we put a system in and we measure a signal to noise of like 60 dB, that's great. You know, we're in great shape. We can turn it over to the client. Everyone is happy. No hiss will be heard. Then let's say 3 years later, they start hemming and hawing. Oh, is it time to replace the system? Is it still good? And you measure it. If it still has a signal to noise of 60 dB, it's still performing very well. The health is fantastic. No need to replace it. But if all of a sudden the system starts getting a signal to noise from 60 to 50 or 40, or the signal to noise starts getting worse and worse over time, that's an indication that something is wrong with that device. It could be the mixer, it could be an amplifier, but that's an indicator that something should be replaced. And it hasn't failed yet, but it's probably going to fail in the very near future. So if we spend more time measuring these devices that are put in production, I think we can get a better look at the health of the system. I thought that was a great use of an XL2.
Absolutely. Well, I'll jump in with my first one, and I was going to mention it before. The idea of starting to put numbers to a system, or likening showing up more professionally maybe than you did before. And it reminded me early on in my career, before I even knew what an XL2 was, I found myself, like probably many of us have within the AV industry, in buildings that we probably felt like we didn't even belong there. We were like, wow, I am in a really fancy, nice building and I need to find somebody to talk to because they called me and I'm here to do a site survey. But this building's like, you know, covers multiple acres and it's this massive facility. So early on in the career, you got really good at looking like you belonged in these facilities and you were just working your way through. And I found that a clipboard went an amazingly long way to bringing some validation to why I should be there. And so I just started rolling with a clipboard, and I'd get people stopping. Hey, what are you doing? Do you know where you go? Oh yeah, I'm looking for this person. He's, you know, where I'm just right along the way. And you could get into places that you normally wouldn't get into places. And all of us, I think, in AV have an incredible skill set for doing that. Well, my game upped significantly when I got my XL2. Now I'd show up with the XL2 and they'd be like, whoa, what is that thing? Like, this measures audio, right? So a lot of our clients that aren't a bunch of audio geeks like us love it when you bring a tool to the table that quantifies a conversation with a number that's not your opinion. And we talked about that, you know, in our last episode, and we'll talk about it in many times in the future. It's all about being able to put a number to these things and quantify them, as opposed to making a subjective remark or opinion. And the XL2 started to just build confidence that, wow, not only I thought we were pretty good at AV prior to having the XL2, but now we had a much deeper understanding environmentally of what was going on, as well as what was going on with our system. So it just upped my whole professionalism game, and I call it the ultimate audio clipboard.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that, you know, speaking of trust, right? We talk a lot about trust. I remember being in a project meeting with a client that spends a lot of money on AV, and the designer was there, the installer was there, the architect was there, and I was there as the commissioning agent. Had my test kit, rollabout, and the XL2 with me, and we were talking about an issue with an audio system. And the client pointed to the architect, I don't trust you. Pointed to the designer, I don't trust you. He pointed to the installer, I don't trust you. And he pointed to me with my XL2 because my reports always had NIST traceable test equipment, and just based on the numbers, no subjective stuff. It was all objective. You I trust. You I trust. And that's because, you know, when you have the instrumentation that just gives you the numbers, just looks at the science, it's not like your opinion. It's you're measuring exactly what's going on, and you can't argue it. No one can argue it. It's comforting in that respect.
Yeah, that's amazing. The The second one that I have is bench testing components, which prior to the XL2, I just didn't have the ability to do. And once I learned how to use the XL2 to measure total harmonic distortion through a system, we started doing that a lot. And I came across a really simple system, really basic system. Had a wireless microphone, receiver going into a DSP going into an amplifier, amplifier feeding a couple of pendant speakers in front of a video wall. Basic as it gets. Measure total harmonic distortion in our staging lab, 5%. Can't get this thing under 5%. Check gain structure. It's all set up properly. It's performing perfectly. It's not distorting, but I can't get the meter to read less than 5%. Well, first I called up Jim and I was like, Jim, dude, I have a problem. What's going on here? And he made the suggestion of bench testing each component. So I bench tested the microphone receiver and I plugged the output of the microphone receiver into the XL2 and took an electrical measurement. You know what? It was fine. It met its spec. It was way less than 0.5% THD. Okay, so then I bench tested the DSP. I plugged in a reference source into an input, gain structured it all the way through, electrically measured the output of the DSP, way, way, way under. Very quiet device, met its manufacturer specification. Then I took the amplifier of who shall remain nameless, and I did the same thing with the amplifier. I put the same reference signal into an input on the amplifier, and I measured the output, and I could never get it less than 5%. Then I picked up the phone and I called this manufacturer's tech support line. And my conversation with the tech support line went something like, excuse me, I have this amplifier. I'm trying to measure total harmonic distortion. Your specification says that it can do less than 0.5%. Everything that I've put through it, I can't get it under 5% THD. And the tech was like, I'm going to need to get a different technician because they didn't actually, the acronyms, they didn't know what were happening. So I got a level 2 technician on the phone really quickly. And I went through the same thing with him. And his first question was, what are you measuring this with? And of course I was like, I'm so glad you asked. It's an NTi XL2. Exactly. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So walked him through the XL2 and the process that I was going through. And he was like, I've never had anybody ever call in with that kind of a situation. I have no idea what to do with this. I'm going to need to escalate it to a manager. I never heard back from the manufacturer. And the only thing that we can guess is that there is some circuitry in the amplifier that we did not have access to, that was not made available to us from a configuration or a bypass standpoint, and that was putting some sort of signal on the line that was causing that meter to not be able to read less than 5%. But boy, was it a powerful conversation to be able to call a manufacturer with information, data, science, an approach, a method of which I had come up with it that really helped escalate it very quickly with that manufacturer. And for anybody who's spent any length of time on a tech support call, anything we can do to move that thing forward and get to the root of the issue is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes the calls go faster. You get obviously escalation much quicker. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure they appreciate it too, because now they're not spending hours upon hours with people just saying, oh, it sounds funny. Well, what does that mean? Now we got to sit down and sort that all out. Yeah.
Well, and to your point, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
Well, I was going to just circle back on a comment you made earlier. Like we've installed standard systems for various clients around the world, and it's the same gear, it's the same hardware, it's the same experience from a user perspective, except for it's not from an audio perspective, right? So why is it that we install this exact same set of equipment, tuned and commissioned the same way in room 1, over here, the same equipment performs poorly from an audio perspective? Well, for those of you who have been here and done that for a while, the issue is the acoustic environment. And this tool is incredible for allowing us to start to quantify and put numbers to factors outside of our systems that are contributing to a potentially poor user experience at the end of the day. You had already mentioned it, and I just wanted to kind of cycle back to that because it's so very powerful to start to be able to bring that depth of understanding to your conversations with your clients. And ultimately, the outcome is a better experience for the client. They want good experiences. Sometimes we have to educate them on a deeper level, and this is a great tool in that effort.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why, we exactly like you said, we've been kind of flying blind and for some of our enterprise clients, and I was blown away at how different acoustic environments are between. It's the same client. They actually have acoustic requirements baked into their architectural standards, but in different regions of the world, they're just not applied, and they're not met. And so, whereas in certain places of the world, people would say, I can't even have a meeting in here, right? The air conditioner is blowing so loud, the room is so live, the walls are so thin, there's no privacy. In other areas of the world, it's just the way it is. And so until we got bit, and kind of gotten in trouble because the systems that we deployed perfectly in this one region just didn't work at all in this other region. Now we're considering actually shipping the client XL2s, so we can walk them through how to do the tests, because getting that information back is so valuable. And now we've armed the client with a tool that they can get a lot more information. They can justify the expense of these systems we're putting in, because if you've got acoustically horrible rooms, you got to spend a little bit more money or a little bit more time to implement a proper system. And so now they're armed so that when procurement or their managers say, how come we're spending, let's say, $40,000 on a system instead of 8, they can say, well, look, I mean, over here we've got rooms with a 0.5 second RT60, and over here we have rooms of 1.2 seconds. Never mind putting in technology to get the room to work. I don't want to meet in that room for an in-person meeting. I can't hear you. It's so annoying to talk. Like it's ridiculous. So
It's like everybody having their microphones on in the same room with all their laptops in a conference call.
Yeah,
Only there's no
exactly.
technology involved.
Exactly.
I love it.
Miserable.
Well, Jim, we're at our hour mark, and we should give these lovely folks their time back for those that tuned
Yes.
in today. Do you have any final remarks?
No, get measuring, and really, we're looking under the hood of the NTi XL2. Um, it's a great piece of test equipment. We strongly recommend it, but the takeaway is just get test equipment that can give you this information about your systems. It goes a long way, and it kind of changes the game. And just selfishly, if you like what you're hearing, if you like what you're seeing from Experience AV, please hit that like and subscribe button. We would really appreciate it. That's it.
Love it. Love it. Well, I believe that this concludes our first Under the Hood series. So thank you, everybody who joined us today for some audio geekery. Like Jim said, please like, love, share, tell your friends, tell your kids. We're family friendly for most of the time. But anything you can do to help us get the word out, thank you very much. And keep your eye out for some fun new episodes coming up. We are inviting some guests, so you can stop hearing from just me and Jim and get some other industry passionate folks in here pontificating about where we think the industry is headed and what's up in AV these days. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And with that, again, thanks everyone for your time, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Bye.
Bye-bye.